Welcome back to Signal. We are very excited to have you back in this format. For the ones of you tuning in for the first time, this is the moment where Ramon and I host great talent, diving deeper into the topics that we're very passionate about, which is the AI and the implication on the future of work, as well as the latest in technology. Very recently, we felt the world is a turning point, and AI has been a great accelerator of that. So Signal will bring a bit of the highlights from the past weeks in form of news and casual conversation. Today here we have the honor to have Julia with us. Julia is the Supernova of the year of the student list in Spain. So Julia, we are very excited to dive deeper into your story and your perspective. Welcome to Signal.
Hi, thank you. Thank you so much for this honor and privilege.
It's very tough to win the Nova 111 list. The student list in Spain, there's more than 2,000 applications every year. And I must say that the quality that we see year on year is amazing. Like I always I thought myself to have been a good student, but when I compare myself against you guys, like at your age, you guys have done amazing stuff. So why don't you walk us like in 30 seconds briefly through your story and your career?
So yeah, I'm born and raised in Barcelona. I did a double undergrad in physics and mathematics, sponsored by my university, the Autonomous University of Barcelona. And then I moved to the UK to start my PhD in the University of Cambridge on like intersection of astronomy, cosmology, and data science, which is sponsored by a Casha postgraduate scholarship and scholarship from the University of Cambridge, my college, which is Wolfson College. Yeah,
it's nice,
impressive. Yeah, exactly. And cosmology and astronomy, I mean, besides Nova being the metaphor of the novas, the stars that you know better than myself, that's where Nova actually come from, stars that shine brighter. But yeah, I'm personally very curious on how you end up into choosing astronomy. It's not a typical choice, at least we've seen in the applications to this year, Nova 111.
Yeah, so I always really liked anything that had to do with the universe. I really like cosmology and like physics and maths. And I think it was a really cool field to focus on. And then again, when I think about like the practicality of it, astronomy and cosmology is a field that has a lot of like big data components. We have a lot of data from telescopes. So anything that you learn that you can apply to astronomy is like really easily transferable to any other data science field. So I thought I really like this topic, I really like this field, and then also anything I learn here will prepare me in the eventual case that I want to move topics. So I thought it was like a really nice fit.
So you're learning for passion on the topic, but then you see yourself maybe moving at some point into more of a AI career. Is that what I'm reading between the lines?
Yeah, I don't know yet. I know I really like astronomy and cosmology and I'm really passionate about it, but at the same time staying in academia sometimes entails a lot of like hard decisions. Maybe you're restricted, where are you gonna live? So I always want to keep myself open, so I like to like go all for it, but also lay the groundwork in case at some point I want to switch to another field, that I'm prepared for it and it doesn't come like sudden.
Totally.
Yeah. And in fact, I think you're also supervising a class in machine learning and deep learning. So it's at the core of everything happening. But shifting more to the actual and practical world of AI applied to your day-to-day, Julia, I think since I'm very far from the academic world, I'm studied, but very far from it. It's just a master degree in the traditional sense. I'm very curious to see and to learn how AI is shaping your day-to-day, both as a researcher, but also to your students, right? Because research is now something that you delegate to an agent in my day-to-day, which I guess is not the same in the PhD world. So walk us a bit through that shift.
Yeah. So I feel like in education, like now, for example, that I'm supervising for the data intensive masters in the University of Cambridge. I'm supervising machine learning and deep learning, which means that I go over worksheets, like example sheets with the students, and then one of my supervisors teaches the theory. And one thing that we're really noticing is that now with the LLMs, it's really hard to teach content and then assess the students. If you do like an old style exam, you just go a 3-hour exam, prove these concepts, do the derivation, then they are on their own. But when you do, like, for example, courseworks on machine learning, you have to devise something that they won't just be able to do with like an LLM. So it's really like the focus on that. And then the last point you said, like during my day-to-day, I delegate research to an Asian. That's actually something that we're starting to do, not delegate, but on our day-to-day research, we are implementing LLMs more and more, because that's something that a lot of like professors, younger professors at the university, especially like University of Cambridge, they are really attuned. They really know how to use LLMs on their daily research to like accelerate, automate things that they don't require their attention, so they can focus on other tasks. And professors that are not so young are still like more reticent to adapt it. So I feel like we do use LLMs daily in our research. Like for in my case, a lot of us, like the younger students, it's been like roughly like 6 months since we've written like a line of code on our own. So like for us, like it's more like code architecture design, like thinking about like which problem is it important to tackle, how are we going to tackle it, but then like going down and writing the code ourselves, it's something we delegate to LLMs. And then obviously you check, you go like, you have like GitHub repos that you test, that like, so you have like all the different versions, and then you like test extensively, but you delegate the task of just writing the raw code.
What's your outlook on the future of careers for youngsters, right? There's a lot of turmoil in the market, with people saying, okay, if juniors don't do, let's say, what we used to do, the hard work of the analysis or the coding, how are they going to learn to then be seniors, right? What's your perspective on this? Like, do you really need to go the hard way of writing lines of code to understand software, or can you guys already abstract yourself a level higher and be, and be okay with that already from an, let's say, early career without having to do the hard work?
So I think this is tricky, but for example, for me, I already did my undergrad mostly without LLMs. So I already took my like coding classes without LLMs. So I had to go through that. And I feel like this is because one of the main aspects that differentiates like a junior from like a more experienced, like a professional, is that they already have had to deal with these problems on their own. They know like how to solve it or have the intuition for it, and then LLMs just accelerate it. But if a junior faces this problem for the first time, they don't have like the taste or the intuition on like what's wrong, what could be improved. So I would say that like for younger professionals now that want to like insert themselves on the market, have like at university, obviously use LLMs to like help like improve your output. But then, for example, when you go into a maths exam and a physics exam, then it's where you test that you're actually understanding the basic concepts. And so then just use LLMs to accelerate, but making sure that you understand what's going on. It's the same thing that like if you already know how to solve a problem and you ask an LLM to help you, you're going to be able to guide it so much better.
Just you know where are the corner cases where it might go. If it's wrong, it smells wrong, and you can give feedback. Yeah. The problem is that you don't understand the core concepts behind it. You're unable to tell what's right from what's wrong.
Yeah. So train yourself on like the core. Yeah. Sorry, go.
No. I was about to say that's I think precisely the hardest part, because as lazy humans, I put myself in the shoes of a 19, 20 years old who can get things done quickly at uni. I think it's really hard to find a balance in between guiding them through the pain and explaining to them why it's important. So I'm not too sure people would put themselves into that journey if they can avoid it. I don't know if you have seen any trend here, or you see people complying with this principle of learning on my skin before I move into LLM delegation.
I think here that's one thing that a lot of like professors at university are talking about, that like before it used to make a lot of sense to have like written exams in person and then a lot of the examination be done as part of courseworks. But now anything that you can take home, you're basically going to be able to get a good grade just because you use LLMs with it. So it's really important to have this component of like in-person written examination when it's just you, a white sheet of paper, and like what did you actually understand. So like have this component, and that's when you train like the next generation to like know the basics, know the core, and then they can go on and use LLMs to accelerate, but they have the basics. And then develop the taste and judgment that older people already have because they have their whole career, and then you just need to learn.
And how are you seeing the adoption from the other side? Like what are your students doing? Like, do you see any trending or any pattern in them actually, thanks to LLM and a more personalized tuition, being faster at grabbing these core concepts? or are they on the opposites too much reliant on LLMs, so they are a bit more unable to think on their feet when they have a written examination in person?
So one thing that surprised me is like when I went into the class, I thought more people would be using LLMs. So I was surprised to see that some students, or they were not, for example, they were not using like command line agents. They were still like maybe copy pasting their code to like ChatGPT, which is like something a little bit outdated now. So I was surprised that not everyone had adopted it, but people who had adopted it, they still have these written examinations. So they were like, maybe like the basics of like design for an exercise, design this code that does this and test like find the solutions to this equation. They were able to do it, but then in class you ask them questions, you can really tell who actually made the effort to understand the theory and not just like replicate whatever the LLM said. Like actually understand, and they are able to draw like conclusions from it, or like extrapolate to something else they haven't seen before.
Mm-hmm. And if you have to position yourselves on more optimist or pessimist regarding the job market, I don't think you are actually looking for jobs right now, but how is maybe your friends from Barcelona, how are they experiencing their first steps into the labor market? Is it a tough labor market out there for juniors? It is an easy one? Like, how are they experiencing that?
I think my group of friends, we are all like physicists and mathematicians, and a lot of us are working like really closely with AI. And right now, most of us are doing PhDs. So we are not like finding this like daunting like market of like struggling to find jobs. But I do think that for other sectors, it's gonna be hard to adapt. I don't think it's gonna be like, oh, suddenly all these jobs are gonna disappear. But it's true that a lot of like jobs that used to have a meaning now will be automated. So these people will learn to use AI so that they can like improve their work so that they can sit on top of the AI, because like some things that like used to be their tasks are just gonna be replaced.
Yeah, it's true that also your skill set and knowledge is highly demanded, actually more than ever. So I think you specifically might find quite the opposite. But it's true that when looking at global trends, the junior job positions are in decline versus the more senior ones. So yeah, I think it's maybe an elevation, as you say, because we start doing more meaningful work and we delegate to the machine what can be delegated. But yeah, outside of the data field, I think there will be some signal of slowdown. One maybe last question on your take, Julia, is more related to the outcome that AI and LLMs will enable in terms of expanding the knowledge and frontier of humanity, because I've seen that thanks to LLMs, progress in research have been, jump starting and leapfrogging to many years in. I don't know if your perspective on it is optimistic in the sense of shortening our time to next, unlocks and discoveries.
So I think that like LLMs are being really a breakthrough when it comes to research. Like this is not even my field, but there's a lot of research on like doing like mathematical proofs that you can automate via LLMs. And this is like a whole field. There has been some controversy because there have been like mathematical researchers that have been working in a set of problems for a long time. And now there's like an A-based company that has published like a proof on it. So that's controversial, but at the same time, that's change, no? That's what's driving forward society. Another thing, one of the things I'm most worried about is, for example, this is already, for example, in academia, this is already a problem that like to get like hired as postdoc, as a professor, as a tenure, one thing that really matters is how prolific you are, how many papers you publish. And this has made like the whole field focus a lot on quantity over quality. And there was a paper by Irania Paris that discussed this, and like LLMs have increased this issue. So like now with LLMs, you are like able to publish so much more, and this doesn't necessarily mean that you improve on quality. So that's one of the things I'm like most worried about, like being like just swarmed by a bunch of like papers that don't really like improve like your deep knowledge of a topic. But at the same time, it's making so many breakthroughs in so many different areas that I think it's something to be excited about, and just be careful on what is it good for, what is it not, and what needs some thought on how it should be used so that we really can get the best of it.
But is academia relying on specific purpose LLMs, or is any Claude Anthropic model? Like, what is the trend?
Right now, I would say like it's all about depending on the research group. In our case, we rely usually on like Anthropic, GPT, like whatever subscription you want to pay for, and we rely on that to like help us with our research. There's also other AI research groups that are building their own models, or like are building like multi-agent systems to drive research forward. There's Denario, a group in Cambridge that does that. And then I've also heard talk about to trying to like improve the reliability of these services, to build like, instead of like just relying on like big corporates to like provide you with these LLM services, just have like a local version that like the university can run on its own. But for now, we basically use like the big main companies. But it does depend on the PI and the research group. The PI is the principal investigator, like the researcher at the top.
Maybe one last on this topic before we move more into the news. What would you say is the one thing that maybe your generation is understanding better about how to work with AI when you compare yourself against kind of older professionals? Is there anything there that you see a big difference?
I think it's how easily we adapt to new things. I feel like maybe like older, more experienced professionals, they have been working in the same way for long years, and they are really good at it. That's why they are where they are. But like during their like period of professional growth, there were less changes. And for us, ever since we started high school, university, the speed of change has been so fast that we are really used at adapting at anything that comes new to us. So when like with how fast paced like the AI field is, that like there are news every day, new models, new subscriptions. Like you cannot get a like 1 year subscription on like one company because it makes no sense. And this kind of like knowing what to look at and like stay on top of the game, I think like younger generations are better at, but because that's how they have been raised.
I couldn't agree more. And actually, this is one of the arguments I typically use against those that, yeah, I'm only hiring seniors. Not so sure, because I've seen juniors in our company. We have seen them that are crazy productive at a very young age, simply because they don't have the, let's say, the old ways of working. And there's always some transition and some unlearning to do that is tough. And we humans, as you say, we're lazy people, right? That if we cannot change, it's easier not to change. So I would agree 100% with that. And yeah, I think probably for the top 10% of people your age, I think you're not going to have any trouble finding jobs because you're going to be so productive. The problem is probably the difference in between that top 1% where you are or the top 10% versus the rest is the biggest ever in history. So, and that's what's going to be troubling probably for society at large and for employment, but certainly not the people we see at Nova, and particularly in the Nova 111. I think you're going to have a bright future because you already know so much more and you are so much more capable than what we were at your age. So, yeah, I think it's exciting for people like you. Like the future, I think the future is going to be very, very cool.
Well, let's hope that as overall as a society, we can all find like a common ground where like everyone can prosper. But yeah,
exactly. I think that's where the challenge is, that we need to provide. I mean, we need to find ways for the rest to keep thriving as well.
Yeah, I think on the counter side of this fast adaptation, I was reading a tendency in IQ at the global level, like IQ levels, and two things are declining. IQ on aggregated levels are gradually going down as challenge and critical thinking gets challenged less, but also attention span and focus. I think from the previous generation, the company's organization gets the value of deep focus for longer than an hour session, while our generation, as you rightly said, Julia, we have been so accustomed to find sources of news and adapt our day-to-day so fast that I think also our brain has some limitations on a few other things. So the merging of these two generations, I think, can create a good balance overall. So I think
it's funny that you put yourself, Andrea, in the same generation as Julia, because you're not, but
no, exactly.
We'll accept it.
Totally. No, I'm already.
It sounded right to me.
It's a 10-year difference that is like a lot. Yeah. Anyway, shall we move to some of the news? So here, Julia, we brought a lot of news that we read out there, typically on Twitter, but others. So you may just comment on them, or if you have things that you read in the past few days that you found cool, like please by all means bring them in. What I'm only reading in Twitter this last couple of days is the Musk versus Altman battle. I don't know how many tweets by Musk, by Elon in the last few days against what he calls scam Altman. Have I read, but many. And yeah, on Monday the trial starts, and as you know, basically they have a federal trial where they are battling around, the history of OpenAI that, as you know, started as a non-for-profit organization and then was turned into a profit organization. And then Elon is basically saying that he funded the whole thing and then got nothing. And, it's, it's, I guess, a big turmoil out there on this.
Tough battle. No, indeed. I think Musk and Sam were really cooperating in the early days. And it was called OpenAI because the vision, if I'm not mistaken, was to make it an open source and make sure AI was being redirected in the right direction. Let's see where this unfolds. But I think, of course, the main news, or that maybe you can relate to here, Julia, is that finally OpenAI came forward with their latest model with GPT 5.5. And even the image generation model, the latest, is apparently the best on the market. We were actually on Product Hunt with No Recruiter the same day they were with the new image model, and apparently it's performing better than even the Claude Opus 4.7. So I'm even tempted now. We went all Anthropic in the company, and now reading all the buzz that every launches creates, I'm feeling the FOMO of, maybe we're missing out on the edge. As you said, Julia, maybe you don't buy annual subscription because you want to be free to switch around. I don't know if you have had the experience of GPT versus Anthropic yourself.
So right now, like in my group, I'm fortunate enough that we get both. We share like the Pro GPT, and then we get like a Claude, like runs out super fast, but like enough. What I did notice is that Opus 4.7 is not. I tried using it. Some other people at my department tried using it, but it's not as good. And also like checking the benchmarks, it does not compare as well. So for example, for Anthropic, I switched back to 4.6. Opus for like big reasoning, then Sonnet implementation. And then GPT 5.5, it's amazing. And you obviously have the thing of like being open source or not. You have DeepSeek, which is open source, and now they think they got a new model out that was also quite good. But I work mainly with GPT and Claude, and we do this thing of just monthly subscriptions. And then basically on like, I said monthly before, but sometimes it's weekly. When a new model comes out, you check the benchmarks. If it's really good, you switch.
But apparently on the benchmark, the 4.7 was supposed to be better than 4.6. No, it's like more your experience that tells you that it's not working as well.
My experience, and then also talking with other people in the department, like it jumps like faster to conclusions, or it's more prone to saying that like it has read thoroughly something, but it has actually like read diagonally. So And also one thing I noticed as well, depending the models, like the model's performance that you get as a user depends also like on a daily basis. There's actually web pages where you can check that. So what we do, like basically in like in the research group, I mean, like what the PhD students and the PI does is like basically weekly we check like which models are best, and we also talk with each other like how is this model working for you now.
Wow.
Right. That's interesting. So every week there's a model that will perform better, maybe based on capacity of the inference machines and so on. And then is there any task that you delegate more to GPT-5 versus Opus? Like, are there tasks that you believe one model is more suited than the other?
For example, I use one thing I use LLMs a lot is for HPC, for high parallel computing. Like when I go on the HPC, like sometimes you work like on local in your machine, but then when you want to run like big codes, you like work on the HPC. And I find Claude is really good at that. So for example, like finding out like which APC like configuration is best to run my jobs, like depending on how many other people are using which computers. Then as well for model architecture, I find that Claude Opus is really good at that. So I usually like, since Claude, I have the £20 a month subscription, it runs out quite fast, especially with the new like weekly limits. So what I do is I usually design the architecture of what I want to do with Opus, and then I either implement it with Sonnet or GPT. And I also use I design with Claude with Opus, then I check with GPT, then I implement with Sonnet once I've also cross-checked with GPT. So that's kind of like the thing I have going on right now. But I might say this now, maybe in a month, it's different. It also depends a lot, with the PhD students in our group, we have these Monday lunch meetings, which is basically talking about which LLM are you using, how are you using it, tricks, also a lot of forks or tools that you can just have on your report on your your VS Code or whatever interface you're using that help you manage these LLMs.
No, it's pretty crazy. And I think on that, Claude and Anthropic came out with sort of excuse around 4.7 not performing as it should and resetting because there were a few in the communities complaining about the performance. And the latest email I got this morning is that now by default, they go to 4.7 with extra high effort, because I think some people do not really deal with the effort level, and that really changes the performance. So I guess they're trying to let people be always on the top, at least, even because of token consumption. Of course, that's money.
Yeah.
But I think exactly the effort, I think the intelligence is only higher when you put the effort in the two higher levels. If you go below that, it's more efficient than 4.6, or supposedly more efficient, but less intelligent. Yeah, interesting. There's also some news on Google, right? This week, that you brought, no?
Yeah.
TPUs, yeah.
I think, exactly. The TPU. I think long term, our assumption, even in Signal, based on our limited knowledge, is that Google being fully vertically integrated is the designed winner of the AI race. If you think strategically, they own the infrastructure, they own maybe the largest data set on humans population. So there are many signal pointing to Google being the winner, even though Gemini feels a bit outdated lately. But the latest was exactly that Google, I think, has signaled the intention to split their production and creating custom machine silicon for inference training and increasing the capability. I don't remember the factor of magnitude, but it was a huge increase of capability versus the previous version. And we can already see Meta, Anthropic, and even OpenAI booking and pre-ordering. So I think the NVIDIA monopoly, it's starting to be challenged, and it's good for, of course, competition and prices going down. But it's a strong signal for Google doubling down on the actual infrastructure. So I think it's great news for everybody because of cost as well.
Yeah, here, for example, in our university, we basically use A100s and H100s, so NVIDIA GPUs. We had try with Intel, but they didn't work as well. Basically, the source and how much support can you get to use them? And just a week ago, one of my supervisors said we got this grant for all these new TPUs. If you want to try it in Google Colab, so even in academical settings, it is being implemented, because now the end game was NVIDIA GPUs. Intel had been a little bit deprecated, but now these new TPUs came out. And I'm still running on NVIDIA, but our PI said that we had all these TPUs available to try, because especially with the new specialization that they have for training, for inference, and they're also really suited to certain tasks, so they can be very competitive, and then you move out from just relying on a provider on giving you.
That's good. But are you building on-premise data? I mean, are you building on site and not relying on cloud when you say the GPU?
So in our case, we work with the HPC of it can be the universities or the department's HPC, or it can be a government HPC. It can be governed by the UK government. And now these TPUs, for example, are in Google Colab, that you can also have access to with grants from your supervisors.
Interesting. I guess that's done partially also for data protection, IP protection, right? That you don't want to run your research only on third-party providers' machines, and
yeah.
Interesting. Cool. I think that the piece of news that I got that is probably interesting for you, Julia, because if I had to pick one company that matches, like from the little I know from you that you love astronomy and you love AI, I guess the SpaceX is the company, right? Because it combines probably the best of both. Now that it's is it already did it merge already with the XAI, right? It's already
Yes.
one entity. I'm not sure if that came through.
They're
finally.
finalizing the transaction before the IPO. But
So
yeah,
they are going IPO together, right? The both of them.
I think it was February was when they announced the acquisition. Yeah, so it should be done.
Yeah. So they did an offer to Cursor. So apparently there's a round of $2 billion at a $50 billion valuation, and then they have a call option to acquire the entire company. I don't know if you guys know the story of Cursor, but it's a very nice one. I can basically tell it for the audience briefly, but it's 4 grads from MIT that went on directly, like maybe like Julia could do like next year or the year after she finalizes her PhD, just drop everything and starting a company. They had to pivot thrice. So first they started a CAD tool, like imagine kind of Autodesk kind of thing for mechanical engineers. Didn't work. Then they did something like text to image kind of thing. And then finally the code editor that came in 2023. And then, history will, it's from there because basically I think that the smart decision they make is that they make a fork, as you were saying, Julia, of VS Code. And then, the whole thing would look like VS Code, but it was their own IDE. And then they did $1 million ARR by end of 23. Beginning of 25, they were at 100 million. Mid 25, they were at 500 million ARR. And then they are now today at 6 billion. So it's, the level of growth is just crazy. At the same time, we're seeing that maybe the most forward-looking engineers have moved away from Cursor. Like we used to be client, we're not anymore. But the reality is that probably you at Cambridge and we at Nova, we're kind of early adopters to this whole thing. And we are just although we talk to each other a lot, we are a very small subset of the population. And then apparently now everybody's coming to Cursor, which is, fantastic story. Apparently their first investor invested 200K and then got out the investment at exactly 200K. It's a fund called Alameda. And then they struggled to get the first real fundraising. They got it finally from OpenAI. That was the first institutional investor. And yeah, in 3 years, they took the company from basically 0 to 6 billion ARR. There are not that many companies out there that do 6 billion ARR. So crazy.
I think we have the similar experience. I feel like last year we were using Cursor a lot. I feel like at the time, especially like last year, it was much more advanced than if you were just using like VS Code alone. Also like command line interface LLMs were not as readily available. But ever since we got those, at least people closer to me, we have stopped using Cursor, but yeah, it is amazing. And it was also like one of the pioneers. That was like one of the first platforms that you could have like readily available and also like very user friendly.
I guess that everybody's using now command line, like Claude directly from the terminal or from the app, desktop app. Also same with Connect.
Yeah, and also it's easier. I would say, like in my experience, it's easier to like if you just go on VS Code and then have your forks on the command line. It's easier to install if you want to run on the HPC or in a remote computer from your department. It's easier to set up.
Yeah. I think one news which is both emotional for the Apple fan and strategic is, as you know, that Tim Cook journey comes to an end, which is pretty insane because he took over Apple at a 250 billion company. Now is 4 trillion. In 15 years, he raised the value of the company massively. But I think the interesting element to the news is that they elected this guy called John Ternus, who's been the hardware chief of Apple, as the next CEO, which is also a bit of a strategic bet into the future for Apple to build around hardware still as the moat. Because what I was reading, an interesting article is that the race to put an hardware that can run AI on it in the hands of millions, it's quite an incredible distribution advantage. So even though Apple has lost the software AI race because actually they never had the chance or they never really played the game, it seems that they want to double down on the hardware penetration because it's going to be a a very big moat. So yeah, I think it's both an emotional news, but also I think a bit of a strategic stance of Apple in the future. Yeah, so I think it's interesting.
It's interesting because if you think about it, the two of the biggest players are hardware players, no? Like Nvidia and Apple, and a bit hardware. Like one is distributed, the other is more for big amounts of compute, no? And they are the ones, selling the shovels when people go for gold, right? So yeah, Apple also, I think it's probably one of the winners, as you say, in the race. I'm though quite surprised of how poorly. What's the name of the assistant on the phone? Yeah, Siri. Like, how come they don't simply get an alliance with someone like 11 Labs, OpenAI, whoever, and make it work?
They signed it with Gemini, so the next iteration would be Google-based. So OpenAI was at the forefront of the run, but then for some reason they switched to Google, I guess for institutional reliance. So I think Siri will be based on Gemini in the next iteration of software.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Another piece of news that I believe is quite relevant that got a bit unnoticed is that there was a tweet by Sam Altman a couple of days ago saying that they had changed I think the word was updated the terms of their agreement with Microsoft. The word updated was used intentionally to say that they are basically breaking up as an agreement. So basically they are liberating themselves. So Microsoft is going to be able to basically offer other models to clients, and they're kind of breaking up in a way. It's going to be they're going to be using also OpenAI servers from other providers. They already got a lot of investment by Amazon and Google as well. So yeah, what used to be the best partnership in tech is coming to an end, apparently. I think it was a smart play by the both, because if you see the multiple that Microsoft is going to do on I think it was 10 billion or something they started investing. It's going to be something like 20x or something already at the latest round. And yeah, and for OpenAI, of course, having the Microsoft distribution was key. But yeah, they are finally breaking up, although they are not saying that quite out loud.
In a diplomatic way.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Cool. Yeah. Anything else before we leave? Any other piece of news that was interesting for any of you?
I think one I've read more as a trend lately from China. I think you mentioned during the beginning DeepSeek V4. But the trend of open source model with much lower parameters window, so trained on data sets that are much smaller, they start to give the same level of output performance at a ridiculous cost fraction. So I think there is, we are always skeptical around Chinese models in the Western world, but the open source game with much more efficient models seems to be paying off, because the difference with Anthropic 4.7 and others is very limited. So I'm very curious to see where this is going, because it would be a massive change, I guess. I don't know. I mean, you're more technical, Julia. I don't know if you have any open source model, but it seems like there is an opportunity there for consumers.
I think for in our case, when we deploy, when we use LLMs daily, right, at least in the research group, we don't use open source models. We move more towards Anthropic and GPT. But it is really interesting, and I feel also within the community, it's followed very closely. And then as well for the relevance for research, if you're doing ML research, having access to the open the code of how the of the LLM, the weights, it just gives you so much more potential. There was a work by a student in our group that basically you have the black box of these LLMs. So just having open source LLMs available just gives you so many possibilities on everything you can get from it. What happens if you trick some neurons, all the information you can get from it. So it's, and also as well smaller models that can have similar output. So I feel right now it's still maybe not as widespread as the big companies in the West, but it's certainly something that at least I'm it looks very promising, and we're following it closely to see where it goes.
Yeah, it's cool because the smaller data set, it's a bit more quality over quantity. Instead of training your model on the entire internet, we see, I think, a narrowing of focus, which might be good in the long term. So yeah, exciting to see where the race ends. From my end,
many
It
use
never
cases
does.
for that, no? Because we are, for instance, in our case, we launched last week Nova Recruiter, and we launched it with a fully agentic workflow. And there's a piece of it that was that people appreciated a lot that we call the AI shortlisting, which means we turn a search of maybe 100, 500 profiles into what are the best 50 for this position, right? And we started seeing that if you put, let's say, relatively smart models, the cost of the AI, like we have spent a lot of dollars on inferences last few weeks. So we started to think as a company, okay, how can we provide the same level of experience with a cheaper model? And that's where this kind of open source would come in very handy as we start to optimize. So yeah, I think there's going to be a market certainly, because you're always going to want, there's certain use cases where having Opus 4.9 won't make it so much better for a lot of use cases. So
yeah. Also,
anyway.
like I feel like checking biases, like if you're using it for specific tags, you want to know the reasoning behind it. So if you have access to the weights, it also opens like a new avenue.
Mm-hmm.
Before we let you go, Julia, and before we ask the final question, actually, I was curious. I didn't check. Were you a member of Nova before applying to the list, or did you apply directly to the Nova 111?
I applied directly to the Nova 111, but I had been following you for a while. So
Okay.
yeah.
You were waiting for the moment to become a member through the list. Okay. So you haven't
with the podcast, yeah.
Exactly. So today, I guess, is your first day as a Nova member, right? So
yes.
Yeah, you let us know how the experience goes from here. That if I'm not mistaken, you guys get a lifetime membership, no? So
yes, I was reading the email. Yeah, I'm very excited about that. I didn't know about it, so
yeah,
very
cool.
excited.
So
Thank you so much.
you let us know the British community is growing fast. The community in London, and we'll have also sometimes events there in Cambridge. But yeah, before we let you go, what do you take with you?
So honestly, I've been following like the Nova platform for a while, so it's really a privilege to have been selected as a Supernova, but also like be able to participate in this podcast. And yeah, just like I would feel like from this conversation, just like a reiteration of how important it is to keep up with the news, with what's going on in the world, to try and stay on top of like everything that can help you like become a better professional and do better your job. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, from my side, I think the takeaway, it's really a reminder for us as leaders in the AI era to really navigate the complex ecosystem to find the right things for the right challenge instead of going with one knife for all the battles. You explain very well how you play around with different models. Every week you have that critical mindset of comparing with the community what's working best, what's working worse. So yeah, I take with me the reminder that even if you develop an emotional attachment or familiarity to some models, I think it's always good to challenge ourselves on a weekly basis and take it as an ecosystem perspective where maybe here I need Opus, but there I need maybe GPT. So I think that ability to jump around, it's going to be a good part of the AI literacy requirements.
Yeah, and if I had to end, what I take with me is a lot of optimism for the future, seeing like bright people like you, Julia, that are Spanish, that are doing great things out there in the most demanding ecosystems, like Cambridge in math is. I think it's probably the best or one of the best unis. So having Spanish people like you there is, it's amazing. And yeah, very proud of what you're doing, and also very convinced that the new generation, I don't think it's going to have any trouble to keep making a big impact on the world because, it's crazy that at your age, you're already on top of everything. So yeah, happy to have you as a Nova member and as the winner of this year's list.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you so much for giving us. I feel like as well, like to like progress professionally, one thing you need is like connection, network, visibility, and this is precisely what Nova gives us. So also really thankful for creating this platform.
Thank you, Julia, and congrats again, and good luck with everything ahead.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. See you next week. Bye-bye.